Hello, my name is Hassan Bazi and today's topic will be on white rhinos, scientific name Ceratotherium simum, and their comeback from the endangered list. To start off, there is a common misconception that white and black rhinos are the same species. However, this is not the case. Although they share a common genotype, white and black rhinos are two different animals. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the two species. White rhinos have a broader mouth compared to black rhinos' beak-looking mouths. This is due to white rhinos eating large quantities of grass, as they are grazers, and black rhinos eating shrubs, which make them browsers. White rhinos have downwards heads with larger horns, also known as ivory, which makes them more valuable to poachers than the black rhino, and black rhinos have a more upwards head and smaller horns. And finally, the obvious difference between these two animals is their coloration. However, sometimes rhinos could be a grayish color, so it's very important that we understand these other key differences to distinguish them from one another. Here's a picture of a white rhino and her child. Rhino pregnancies are about 18 months on average, making it hard for rhinos to reproduce and expand their population quickly. With this, as well as the mass killings of rhinos, has led to a rapid decline in their population. Rhinos live in tropical and subtropical grasslands, savannas, and shrublands in Africa, and are often hunted for their ivory within those regions. Ivory is the horns of the rhinos, which is held to high value by many African countries as well as some Middle Eastern cultures. The market for ivory has been in high demand due to restrictions on rhino killings as well as decrease in their population. Ivory is often used to make weapons, tools, handles, as well as jewelry, which is held to high standards by many African tribes. Poaching rhinos for their ivory consists of shooting the rhino and removing the horns, often by their roots, which ultimately leaves the rhino critically injured or dead. And here is a picture of a rhino poacher aiming at its target. And here is a picture of a white rhino which has been poached, which is obviously very sad to see, as this has been the fate of many white rhinos.
They've been roaming the earth for more than 50 million years. Today, the African rhino has more value dead than alive.
Poaching activity coming across our boundaries is relentless. It's daily.
Home to the world's largest rhino population, South Africa's Kruger National Park is infiltrated daily by poachers prepared to kill for rhino horn.
At the moment, what we're up against here is a war. It is a counterinsurgency type war.
Officials here say 90% of the poachers come from neighboring Mozambique. The rhino horn is sold for tens of thousands of dollars in the East, where it's believed to cure all kinds of conditions, from hangovers to cancer.
We've had poachers killed who've been in armed contacts with our field rangers, but it doesn't seem to deter them.
A record 668 rhinos were killed in South Africa last year. Compare that to just 14 in 2005. This year, another record slaughter is predicted. Investigators like Frick Rousseau are trying to stop the killing through securing successful convictions.
If you don't get here quickly enough, evidence do get destroyed, carried away.
On this occasion, 4 days after an attack on a 1-year-old calf, some clues remain. Further probing reveals a bullet, but Rousseau will need much more.
Ballistics doesn't necessarily put a suspect on the scene. It may put the firearm on the scene. So one would like to retrieve something like tracks left by the suspects, fingerprints, DNA.
Rhinos in South Africa are being killed so fast investigators can't keep up, and everyone involved complains about a critical lack of resources. From the 30 soldiers patrolling the Kruger border,
we need at least a battalion here,
to environmentalists overwhelmed by the scale of the problem.
But it's really an international solution we're looking at. Because it's a few criminals that have positioned themselves very comfortably in between naive people in the East and the poor people in Africa.
And bearing the brunt of all this is an animal that could live up to 50 years if it were ever free to roam again. Nkepile Mabuse, CNN, Johannesburg.
So that was obviously a very sad video, but to continue, here's a diagram of the food web that white rhinos are in. This is a very complicated diagram, so we'll look at a more simple food chain diagram instead to see what is actually affected once you remove this very important species within the ecosystem. Here's a food chain, and we can observe that the white rhino eats plants and is eaten by apex predators such as lions and cheetahs. They are also a big food source for some vultures, but unfortunately that is not shown in this diagram. With the removal of the white rhino, these predators will lose a big part of their food source and could be harmed as well, and that could ruin the whole food chain. Here is a graph of the white rhino species. As we can see, the white rhino has been on the endangered list throughout the 1900s and even prior to that. They have been more endangered than black rhinos due to their bigger horns for ivory, making them higher in demand. Fortunately, many safety precautions and sanctuaries keeping these white rhinos safe throughout the years. Sadly, there are only 2 northern white rhinos left, but the general rhino population has climbed to 20,000, taking these rhinos off the endangered list. For a better visual, here's a bar graph of the population of white rhinos. And here's a scary statistic about rhinos, which is that about 10,000 white rhinos has been poached in the last decade, despite our efforts to completely stop poaching. Although poaching may never be solved due to its high demand in some cultures, we have many safety precautions to reduce the killings of these precious animals. Here are my sources, and thank you for watching.